Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of TF Labs and our events that we do about Web3, blockchain, NFTs, crypto, Bitcoin. We're always talking about Web3 in different ways, and we bring in amazing builders in the space, investors in the space, people who are working on these, awesome, great and new technology. And today we're going to be talking about the world of Web3 and gaming. So really looking forward to this. We have some amazing guests who will be joining us that I'm going to introduce you here in a bit. But before we get started, I do want to make sure that those who are here with us, please feel free to ask questions on the side. You'll see there's a section that says messages. And you can definitely add to the conversation there. I'm going to do something real quick. I'm going to ask everybody a question. Where are you listening from? So everybody feel free to jump in there. Love to know where everybody's listening from. Go ahead and put it. Australia. Oh, awesome. Oh, Preet. Oh, my goodness. I know Preet in real life. I can't believe you're in Australia. It's so good to have you here, Preet. I'm so glad you're here. I look forward to catching up with you, too. So real quick, if you are not familiar with TF Labs, we've been hosting blockchain and Web3 conferences and events since 2017. Our flagship event is called the TF Blockchain Conference, which we host in person. We've hosted that 4 different times in person, once virtually, and we'll be hosting it again on June 1st. That'll be our 6th conference here in Seattle. Would love to welcome any of you to join us, participate if you're in the area. So Ross, who is our event and community manager, he'll be putting that in the thread where people can learn more information about that. We also do host these virtual events. We typically do one event weekly on a variety of different subjects. Last, some really exciting and fun news for the TF Labs team and the NIFMIT team is that we just got new office space in the Seattle area. So if anybody here is in the Pacific Northwest, in Seattle, or you find yourself here, you have an open invite to come visit us, hang out with us. If you want to work here for a day, you're more than welcome to. So please definitely come through. Overall, we'd love to have you. And we'll also be hosting in-person events monthly here as well. So with that, if you could all do us a favor too, let's get more people in the room. If you wouldn't mind tweeting out this event, or you can also, if you're following me on Twitter or TF Labs on Twitter, feel free to just retweet those items there. So with that, let's get right to it. And I'm going to go ahead and invite our first guest to the stage. And I'll have her introduce herself real quick. So with that, Miriam, welcome to the stage. Thank you for joining us. And why don't you introduce yourself to everybody, please?
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here joining you from Washington, D.C. I'm the founder of Grid, and we're building the TikTok for Web3 games. So, Jonathan, the platform is called Brashna.io. Brashna means lightning in the Pashto language, which is my mother tongue. I'm originally from Pakistan, and Brashna allows anyone to create their own video games with no code and at lightning speed. So that's who I am. And we have an NFT marketplace and a Brashnaverse and a virtual carnival, and excited to share details today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miriam, and thank you for joining us. Next, excuse me, I'm going to introduce Marcus Esports Howard. Marcus, welcome to the stage. And so excited to have you joining us today. Marcus, you'll just have to turn on your camera because I can't turn it on for you. And Marcus and I, interestingly enough, we've never met in person, but we have exchanged LinkedIn conversations for years, actually. I remember back in, I think it must have been 2017 or 2018, talking about blockchain together. I got to meet a few people in person thanks to Marcus, though we have never met ourselves. So Marcus, welcome. Oh, what happened to Marcus? There he is. Marcus, are you there?
I am now. I'm having some issues, but I'll work through it.
Nice. Can you introduce yourself to everybody, please?
Sure. Marcus Howard, a CEO of MetaArena and an advisor for Game Credits, which is one of the first gaming crypto.
Oh, sorry. Looks like Marcus might be having a technical difficulty. Let's invite Peter up to the stage, and then we'll bring Marcus back. Hey, Peter, how you doing? Oh, there's Marcus. What's up, Marcus? We'll get this. We'll get this right. All right, Marcus, want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yes, Marcus. I'm the one of the advisors for Game Credits, one of the first gaming cryptocurrencies in the history of crypto. I'm also the CEO of MetaArena and the author of the new book, Innovate Gaming and Esports, that introduces parents, teachers, and businesses to the global gaming and esports industry.
Boom. I love that. I'm excited to dig deeper into that. Well, Marcus, thanks for joining us. Yeah, like it's pretty awesome that we've just been maintained a LinkedIn, relationship, but I'm excited to the day we get to meet each other in person sometime soon. All right, so let's bring Peter back up to the stage. Hey, Peter, how you doing? Welcome. Peter is here in the Seattle area as well, and working with some pretty cool gaming stuff. You want to introduce yourself to everybody, please?
Hey, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Peter Hong. I'm a product manager at Mythical Games. I work on the platform team, particularly on all things blockchain related. The latest product that I released was called Ethereum Bridge, where we are allowed to, we enable Blanco's Block Party, which is a game that's currently on the Mythical chain, to enter the Ethereum network. I also help with NFT strategy in-game as well as pre-sale strategy as well.
Excellent, excellent. Excited to dive into that as well. And last but certainly not least, I would love to introduce to the stage Sophia. Welcome to the stage, Sophia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jonathan. Great to be here.
Awesome. I'd love if you could introduce yourself to everybody, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Sophia Trabelsi, and I'm the current Web3 gaming lead at Polygon Studios for the Polygon chain.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, so we have, four amazing speakers, all doing slightly different things, but all focused on Web3 and gaming. So again, if you're in the audience, I do want to invite you to ask questions as the conversation comes along. You'll also notice that Ross has been adding our speakers' Twitter profiles to the chat there. Please make sure that you give them a follow. Make sure that you're following TF Labs and give me a follow as well. And then after this session that we're doing here on AirMeet, we're actually going to move to an after party in Twitter Spaces. So I want to invite you all to join us in Twitter Spaces and just hang out for a little bit. And then, of course, invite people to that as well. So let's just kick this right off. And let's just for a second talk about the gaming space, not even Web3. Let's talk about how the gaming space has evolved over the last even couple years or through the pandemic. You know, I remember being a kid and it was very much frowned upon for me to play video games a lot, right? And like, you know, I had regular Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64 and so forth. And, you know, gaming has come so much further than even console. We have, there's PC games, there's just so much variety of this, right? And, it's, I don't want to say it's necessarily like become cool, but meaning it's because gaming's always had a cool factor to it, but it's becoming more, call it business oriented or thought of like, hey, like this is more than just a pastime. Like this is actually, this could technically be someone's job. And so can anybody feel free to jump into this is like, what's happened, not Web3 again, just strictly in the gaming space. How has that evolved in the last couple years? And anybody just take the torch here and jump with that.
I can go real quick, Jonathan, just with the risk of since I am going to jump off very quickly. So I think I actually see this as the ultimate democratization of video games, right? I mean, if you look at it, gaming has gone very global. It's also the audience, like, when you used to think of a serious gamer, you would think of like 22-year-old sitting in the basement playing Call of Duty for several hours, but actually the average gamer is now a 35-year-old woman, I mean, often playing hyper casual games like on the metro. And I think that games have become such a universal language and across mediums and across types of games. And often when we say games, we just tend to box them, but they're just such a versatile, sector, both in types of games, use cases of games. I've been in the serious gaming sector for a long time. Education, marketing, social impact. I've just seen games being applied for so many use cases, and then the whole user generated content aspect of games and esports and gaming. So I really like, it's very dynamic and it's moving very, very fast. So yeah.
So that's fascinating. First off, I had no idea that about the 35-year-old female gamer. I just never would have known that. And so someone else jump in, like, why is that? Like, why has it shifted towards that versus call it this perceived notion of, hey, this is somebody that lives in their parents' basement? No, like these are, people who have normal day lives, day jobs doing it. What has shifted this to that?
Be glad to speak to some of that. And ironically, I went to the dentist earlier today, and the dental assistant, she was, I would say, early 60s, and she was telling me about how she spends so much time on Facebook meeting new people and playing video games, right? Like her family kind of frowns down upon her for spending so much time playing games, but she understands that there's communication and teamwork, all of these social benefits and mental health benefits that come with gaming that I think just didn't get the opportunity to really shine over the last, let's call it 3 decades. But to Marion's point, now, nearly half the gamers, at least in the US, are women. And we're seeing video games being used, again, to treat mental health issues and being used in business context and research. It's becoming mainstream. It's becoming ubiquitous. It's a part of mainstream and pop culture society.
Yeah, fascinating. Peter, Sophia, anything you want to add to that?
Just on my end, I think that evolution of gaming has been fascinating. I think initially it became a little bit more personal experience and maybe playing solo RPG games. But then a big change that's really occurred lately was a community aspect that Marcus just touched up on. So then the world of the metaverse that's really coming into play, which introduces creativity, which is now being properly valued with Web3.
I agree with what everyone says. I think what's really amazing is, I think back in the day when the gamers would get some criticism for playing games and kind of wasting their time, and now it's really a passive income source, a source of passive income, essentially. Play to earn, the seller and creator economy for selling in-game assets. So we've really opened up the door to many earning potentials where people can essentially play games and earn passive income to pay their rent. The biggest region that we've seen that has been very respondent of play to earn has been the APAC region. So the Philippines, Indonesia, where $30 to $50 for them is, a lot more significant than what $30 to $50 is to North American sort of type populations. Yeah. So they've responded to that quite well. I think there's a lot of things that are happening right now behind the scenes, sort of AAA studios that are coming in the scene. And I think it's interesting to watch how the investor type for play to earn will be replaced by the gamer type of play and earn. So I'm very curious to see how that unfolds.
Yeah, Jonathan, really quickly, if I could add to that, there's 2 stats that are, I think, also helping drive that. One is mobile. Mobile, I believe, by the end of the year will represent between 50 and 60% of the global gaming industry. And then another really interesting stat I saw last week is that 85% of mobile gamers don't self-describe themselves as gamers.
That's really interesting, right? So basically, the numbers could be much higher than basically So, how does gaming work right now, or to in a pre-play to earn, right? Like, so you play Call of Duty, and a lot of people talk about this in the play to earn space is, hey, if I can't take my game or my products elsewhere. How does that work?
So what's the gaming experience without blockchain, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. So like, when you hear this a lot where people say things like, oh, like, you can't take your avatar with you, or you can't take your skins with you, or you can't take your worlds with you. Like, why do I care about that? Why does that matter that I can't take that outside of the game?
I started playing video games when I was 6, and I have a disturbing number of hours invested into this game. I know how to use all of the power-ups and the warps to get to the end of the game. I still can't beat it without those cheats and without the game genie, so I'm no master gamer. But I love the IP, the experience, but unfortunately I can't take that experience and translate it to another game, right? I recognize that there are digital items in the game. I recognize when I collected enough digital tokens or coins, they turn into extra lives, but it's isolated here. That one of the potentials of, and we're starting to see early stages of it, of Web3 is kind of creating a value in one game and then keeping it with you as a gamer, as a player, and then translating it to other games and other experiences.
And anybody else, feel free to jump in. Like, so Peter and Sophia, as don't feel like you have to wait for me to ask the question. If you want to either tag along to what Marcus says, just jump in. Any other thoughts here?
I think a big aspect is less so currently today with like assets within within other games, but I think a big aspect would be the commerce within games that digital ownership really empowers first, and I think that's where all the activity happens. So then a common example that's used is RuneScape. There was a huge secondary gray market that was not legal or valid per se, that eventually Web3 is legitimizing, and in turn empowers players to own their assets, and then maybe make a profit, or also just have a concept of digital ownership and having that translated into money or other forms of cryptocurrency that I think really changes the game for blockchain gaming.
Yeah, I think to that point, Peter, that's a very good point. I think this is kind of a first where you get to actually, there's ownership of digital assets. And I think that's a very powerful distinction between Web 2 and Web 3, which is that your in-game assets are your assets. Whether you're online or offline, they're in your wallet. You have full control of what you decide to do with that. And so we're kind of rewarding and giving power back to the users, especially for games that have sort of like a DAO structure to them, giving a lot more decision-making power to the gamers as to the direction that the game is headed. So that voice of the community is essentially leading the creative process of that game. And I think that's really the big distinction between Web 2 and Web 3. A lot of the Web 2 folks that come to, through Polygon as an example, are trying to kind of find their way in this Wild West, because none of the rules that apply in Web 2 seem to apply in Web 3 and vice versa. So it's really this land of this undiscovered territory, so to speak, that is all happening in real time, of course. I don't think anyone kind of has the answers as to why this is happening and why this applies and why this does not. We're all experiencing it in real time. Even in terms of like surveys and data, there's not really much out there on Web3. So we're in the very beginning, early days. But I think the biggest distinction is the power vested on the user that is quite unprecedented in the gaming industry.
Yeah, like you're bringing that ownership back. Sorry, go ahead, Marcus.
I was going to agree. She made a great point about that being like the most probably significant piece of this, because if you're playing in esports, right? If you play in tournaments and you win cash prizes, you're playing to earn. If you are a live streamer using Twitch or YouTube, you are playing to earn. So that piece of the concept isn't necessarily new, but exactly as she said, like never in my lifetime that I know of have I had the opportunity to have input, let alone influence on the direction of a game. It's transformative. That was a great point, Sophia.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. And to your point, actually play to earn, for me, kind of signifies the investor type, right? Because it is what it literally says it is. You're playing to earn. So you're not really concerned about the game as a whole. It's more so from a speculative point of view of how the token of that game is going to do, right? And I think the biggest player for end of 2021, now 2022, is Play and Earn, which is having a free-to-play version, which is the ultimate sign of confidence that people would play your game regardless of that Web3 layer. So that Web3 layer would be regarded as a bonus to your game, because you're playing, the game is fun, and you end up earning as well. So there's mountains and rivers and lakes between play to earn and play and earn. Play and earn, yeah.
Sorry, folks, I couldn't find the mute button or the unmute button. So for those who are in the audience listening, you know, we were talking about who's a gamer, who identifies themselves as a gamer. And it's funny because I'm probably one of those people who I would not identify myself as a gamer, but I definitely do play games. So, you know, I probably should consider myself a gamer. But if you're in the audience, if you're listening in and you are a gamer, I'd love for you to let, if you are a gamer, what games do you play? And then I'll ask that same question here in a little bit on the play to earn, because that's where the conversation's going. And it's a lot of fun overall. One thing I'm seeing in the comments, I really like what Scott Coda said, where he goes pre-play to earn. So before play to earn, it was basically pay to play. And yeah, that makes that I definitely remember those days. So Sophia, you've been touching quite a bit on play to earn, and you know what Polygon has been doing. Would love if you could kind of discuss of, you know, what I guess kind of means, and then also you know, why this has become, you know, more and more important. You were mentioning how, you know, people are making money doing this. And, you know, like in the Philippines, for example, people are using it as an income source. I'd love if you could just kind of break that down even further.
So was your question, why has this taken such a popularity?
Why is this starting to take off? Exactly. Yeah.
You know, like when I think of Web3, I always think of that gamer, you know, the low-key gamer that was kind of given a lot of crap for playing too many games. And then all of a sudden, you know, he's literally making income from those games. Kind of like when you've been the underdog for so long, getting rewarded based on your skills as well, because gaming is a skill. For me, gaming is strategy, creativity, storyline. And so you're essentially getting rewarded for having those assets. There is sort of a speculative nature as well to that play to earn economy, which is that, you know, you can sell your in-game assets. For me, the ideal future of gaming is not replacing the investors by the gamers, you know, having a nice ratio, but essentially having more gamers. Because instead of selling that in-game asset for more money, you're essentially buying that in-game asset to unlock different levels and increase your earning potential. So let's say there's game X, and if you're on level 10 with this certain NFT, then you're able to have more advantages and thus earn more rewards. So you would be speculating on that NFT for its in-game earning potential versus the market earning potential for that in-game asset. Ideally, that is the future that I would like to see. The reason why people have responded very favorably to this Web3 layer, again, goes back to having more power, more decision making, the ownership of the assets, whether the game succeeds or fails, or they're kind of done with the game or they want to move to something else, they can, instead of their assets living on the cloud, they live on their wallet, and they can dispose of them like however they wish to dispose of them. So if they feel that they're legacy assets, they can keep them in their wallet. If they're looking to have more earnings with those rewards to move on and be able to acquisition assets from other games, then that is a possibility. So also the power of having more choices, right, comes into play.
Fascinating. And Marcus, Peter, do you see that same world that Sophia just started unpacking there for us?
For me, I just always take a step back and then just identify who the users are. So for me today, I see 3 primary buckets of users. I call them flippers or traders, earners, and then players. I feel like each of those demographics have a very distinct want in the space, and some are happy today while others aren't, and vice versa. So then I think what many projects actually want to get are a mixture of the 3, because each brings some value. So for example, flippers and traders currently have a lot of liquidity today in the market, not just in blockchain games, but overall in the NFT market. You can see with OpenSea, LooksRare, Coinbase NFT, the liquidity is quite high, and it's because they also have a lot of liquidity that they can bring to games, which makes them very attractive as a potential user. There is the earners aspect, which are the dominant demographic of users today. Most of the gamers today are in Thailand, Philippines, as well as Venezuela, where the dollar and their currency isn't as strong. Therefore, they are used to using more of these blockchain games to make a way to earn. And is a very important aspect of the audience that we need to think about, because that's where guilds, that's their primary audience there as well. And then the final aspect is players. So we refer to them here as gamers, but these are just people that enjoy gaming at its core concept for fun, not to earn. So these, I think, are the players that a lot of game companies would like to have as their player base, because they're one of the most loyal, as well as the most engaging. But I think in the Western hemisphere, at least, they're the most hesitant, just due to how free to play was sort of ruined for them. So then they are a lot more hesitant with the NFT value proposition. So I think it will take some time before we gain their trust there as well.
It's interesting, actually, Peter, that
trust is key. Go ahead, Sophia. Go ahead.
I was saying it's interesting that you mentioned a really great point, which is that gamers have that loyalty towards the game, which is very important. So sort of in a token setting where everything is kind of going great, it's pumping, it's a very, I wouldn't say superficial, but it's a long-lived success story, right? So if a gamer actually genuinely loves your game, he's there, he's playing the game, he's interacting with the in-game assets from pure loyalty to the game. The investor type, the flipper type, as you've mentioned, the first 3 categories are not so much immersed by the game and they don't really care what happens to the game if, these schemes of dumping happen, or the game, kind of falls into one of those categories of an unfortunate turn of events. For them, it's like, what is my ROI? And that is all I care about. Versus the player is loyal and, thinks about these things. I think that's why having more players to your category, Peter, than having sort of the investor type allows you to speculate on how the game will go in a year, because you can count on their loyalty. So that's a very important distinction. If I, had a game, I would be more concerned about having gamers than investors, because I can count on them for liking the game, versus the investors are a lot more concerned about the speculative side of the industry.
Absolutely. And then just to add on to what you were saying, I really think the makings of a great game and the longevity of a great, especially Web3 game, is the same as if you're building a brand. Currently today, you see a bunch of NFT projects talk about building their art, building their community, building their metaverse, which provides a channel for them to express this creativity, this community aspect. But the gaming aspect adds another layer of engagement and community aspect, which is the core gameplay that some people are much better at than others. And as a result, build a community around that, and just another reasoning for the assets within the game to be more valuable. And then eventually, and hopefully, like the original question was, just interoperability of the game assets within other games as well, but overall in the ecosystem, so they could be used for maybe use cases that the creators never thought of as well.
Marcus, what do you think?
I would agree more with Sophia. I think Peter makes some great points about needing kind of all three classes of the users there for the sustainability long term. But I've been playing video games a long time, as I'm sure many of us have, including the audience. And while gamers are loyal, they can also be a bit flippant, right? So it'll be interesting to see long term, which game is the new, Fortnite versus which one is the new Valorant. Right, Fortnite in 2017 was the game, and I'm not saying that it's certainly making a ton of money. I'm not dismissing that, but it's not the most important game in the ecosystem right now. So I wonder how that will play out in the space long term. The other big thing that I'm concerned with is, to be quite frank, digital slavery that happens in the ecosystem. Because if you have, let's take the Philippines for example, and they have. This game, these series of games have uplifted the Filipino community and throughout Southeast Asia, creating 5 to 7 times the minimum wage there. But to a certain degree, it's also generating a disproportionate, depending on how you look at the economics, amount of value for people who aren't playing, who are just leasing the assets to monetize. So it's a question, more of an ethical question of are we empowering individuals to stand on their own too? Or are we, again, for lack of a better term, enslaving them? And maybe that's not a question for this conversation or a topic for this conversation, but I think it's something that needs to be watched closely.
I think it really applies to this conversation because if you look at a game like Fortnite on Twitch, the streaming community, it's a game that has a community around it. So these people actually, essentially what is streaming is you obviously live streaming your game, but you have all these people that are literally watching you play your game. There's a community around it. And I think that's what is one of the main factors of Fortnite's popularity is the streaming community around that game that we don't really see in Web3, right? Like there's not a lot of Web3 games that are quote unquote streamable. The storyline is lacking, the quality is lacking. Obviously Fortnite is a AAA game, best of the best kind of thing. We're not there in Web3 as of yet. I predict that we will be within the next 9 months to 2 years, where the AAAs kind of settle in and find their space and figure out their identity in this Wild West, and creating a community around those games. I think a good game is only as good as the community around it. So if you have a great game that's not being streamed, or instead of having people talk about the token, they're actually talking about the storylines, sharing strategies. That's when okay, like people are really interested in this and they're being vocal about it. We're not there as of yet, but with the games that we've been talking to as an example, and the games that I've been seeing also from other chains, I think we will get there at some point. And it'll be interesting to see how that kind of streaming esport element interacts with the Web3 layer and what that means. Again, everything's happening in real time, so I don't want to make like a sure prediction, but I'm very curious to see how that's going to play out.
Just also adding back to what Marcus was saying about the dangers of Web3, I think one of the big things that's not being discussed enough is, for example, when we enable the opportunity to earn, there's also opportunity to lose money as well. So then in the world where all these games are coming online and largely games are associated with younger demographics, is there a proper consumer protection from their aspect where maybe they spend or they acquire a large amount of value, but all of a sudden this a smaller kid, or not even a kid, but just a less educated, is not properly equipped with the information to make the right decisions to rather gain money from that asset, or maybe even lose money at a larger level. So then being careful about how we integrate commerce, where we integrate commerce, and what aspects of the game are meant to be for fun and what aspects are meant to be for earning. Because I really think that everyone keeps talking about the upsides, which is super great, but we need to be careful about the downsides and the implications of that as this industry scales as well.
Absolutely,
So
Peter.
can you touch more on the losing part? For those that might not be aware, because you're right, what we hear so much about is play to earn. So, how can people lose money? Are people losing money? Let's take one click into that, if you don't mind.
So then for me, I think the open question that a lot of game studios should consider is what should be an NFT, because I think that's the core fundamental question. Because, for example, I personally play League of Legends a lot when I play video games, and there's a difference between making a champion an NFT in this scenario and making a skin NFT in the scenario. Now, in the case of a champion in League of Legends today, with a similar concept as an RP, there's a way to spend time, you pay with time to acquire an asset that you'd like, or B, you pay money to acquire that same asset. Either ways, there's a pathway to get to an asset without having to spend money on it. I think that's an important aspect. And then also, how does that affect your gameplay? That's a secondary aspect to really consider. Do we really want a pay to earn way that a lot of the gamers really hate from the free to play aspect as well? And do we want everything to be a microtransaction where everything needs to be paid a certain amount in order for me to do something, which does have downstream economic and impact? So then I think just dumbing it down into what is aspect that should be in commerce field and what aspect shouldn't, how should players earn and how shouldn't players earn, I think are very important questions to answer for every game studio.
Yeah, Marcus, you touched on something a little bit ago that I feel like kind of is playing into what Peter is talking about too, where you talked about call it like this digital slavery and so forth. And I think that's also a term that a lot of people have not heard before. Can you double click into that and what does that mean, and how is that currently happening, and is that a preventable thing? Is that inevitable? Obviously that doesn't sound like a very positive aspect. So how do we protect that?
Great question. But first, Sophia was saying something earlier. I wanted to circle back really quick. She wanted to finish that thought, and then I'll jump back over to the digital slavery, because I don't want to be talking about that for a long time.
No, thank you for bringing that back. Actually, I was about to lose that thought in my head, but still have it fresh right now. I think I'm really happy that we're talking about the subject of protecting users at the end of the day, right? So there's many games where there are upfront costs, like Axie, where you have to buy NFTs, and that's not a $20 thing. It's an actual investment. So should we have age limits for these games? How do we impose that? Because you don't want to have kids going up to their parents like, hey, I need like 2 ETH to buy X, Y, and Z, and because they're playing the investor. And then in terms of like losing, if we go back to the play to earn economy, I think we lost Marcus there. Okay. So if
we'll probably come right back. There he is.
Yesterday. If you look at the sort of seller and creator economy, a lot of these folks, they're whitelisted and they go and buy the NFT. They make the NFT, great, and then when you're selling that NFT, that's where it becomes tricky, because you're kind of making a bet that this is gonna increase over time, that you're able to resell this at a higher value and make a hefty profit, and that's not always the case. A lot of people like to use the Bored Ape Yacht Club as an example. I would say that's more of an outlier. I'm very wary of projects that use that as an example, because they had a very specified success. They had certain people that were involved in the project, certain people that were catalysts that kind of resulted in the success that they had. One of the first utility projects, which is that if you're part of this club, then you have access to this secret society. And that kind of alludes to the dreamer in people, that even if I'm not a celebrity, that I potentially have access to celebrity type events and I can mix and mingle with these people. And I'm in this club where there's a finite amount of people that can buy this NFT. And then you see all these celebrities and like, I'm a part of them. So they were able to sell that vision. So I'm very wary when I speak to projects that use that as an example. I would say like that is sort of like the extreme of being in the moment. They were able to grasp the moment, the vision, and that went great for them. I think moving forward, that changes. Obviously, you can't duplicate success. It's very inauthentic and usually doesn't go by smoothly. So I'm very focused on value-driven projects, long-term, as in like talk to me about what you guys want to do like within the next 3 years, growing your community, maturing as a project, becoming a part of the ecosystem is a much more interesting conversation for me.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. I want to be conscious of time. So we're going to be wrapping up this session in about 8 minutes or so. So if you have a question and you're in the audience, I do want to invite you to ask it. Even if you asked it a little bit ago, do me a favor and put it back into the thread. Also, if you didn't see, we are going to be moving this to Twitter Spaces once we're done here. So if you look in the chat thread, you'll see that there's a Twitter Spaces link that I sent out. Go ahead and make sure that you are getting the reminder to join that overall. And like I said, we'll invite anybody here with a question to do so. But as we wrap up, Peter or Sophia, it looks like unfortunately we lost Marcus. Hopefully you can join us on the Twitter Spaces. What are kind of some closing thoughts that you would like to leave our audience with? And I'm actually going to ask this 2 different times in 2 different ways. So what are some closing thoughts for someone who has no idea what gaming is, or not necessarily no idea what gaming is, but in this notion of this Web3 context? What's your closing thoughts for that person, call it the new person? And then what would your closing thought be for someone who has taken the time to invest in this space? Let's start out with the first one. What's the closing thought for someone who's new to Web3 and gaming?
For me, and I'll say the same thing that I said at South by, is really have fun with it. We're very early on in this space. Everything is very memeable. Nothing, I don't want to say don't take it seriously, but it's like have fun learning about what's going on. So my advice at the end of the day is educate yourself as much as possible before kind of diving, head forward. Is learn as much as possible about the project that you're interested in. And there's different mediums right now for understanding if it's a good project or a bad project. It's not like going on a Wikipedia page anymore. It's going on Reddit and seeing the experience that people have had with that project, going on Twitter and, just reading the tweets that people have had as a response to their launch or whatever events that they've had. This community is very big on the socials, and that's always great to see the kind of feedback. So if you read about it on paper and it sounds great, but then you're on their Twitter page and the Reddit community is saying that like, hey, like I've been burnt many times with this thing, I would take that seriously. So I would literally take that as a reference, actually. That's one of the first things that I do when I'm researching a project, beyond like who's the team, what's the project and all that, like what is the community's response to this project, is something that I hit like weigh very heavily on the balance. And everything's online, so try to find out as much as you can. If you're able to even reach the team, like go for it. Everyone's still kind of like small at this point, so it's a great time to start. And there's a lot of information out there. That would be my best advice to newcomers in the space.
And then just building on what Sophia said, I think for me, the biggest set of advice I'd give to newcomers would be, one, just find the game you love. We talk about gaming very as if it's only one area, but there's a bunch of different types of games that will satisfy a bunch of different people. Just explore games that you like. Second would be patient. You'll see a lot of verbiage around NFTs, Web3, ownership, and a lot of people actually hate those terminologies. I really think the best games won't even have to say those words, and you'll just suddenly see the value of that. So be patient. Just because it isn't here today doesn't mean that it's not going to be here tomorrow, because I know for a fact that there's a lot of fantastic game talent already in the space that are building fantastic games. And the third thing is try to engage with the community. A lot of the time, I think for gaming, communities were developed with the gameplay as the core medium. For example, Call of Duty, a ton of people play Call of Duty online and became friends for years because of the gameplay. But now for NFT projects, you can engage with the community from the get-go, from the trailer. And I personally dove into these communities, had amazing experiences where I got to connect with people across the globe, and then understood like, wow, this global community aspect is something I could really get on board with. So being open-minded to that, I think if you do those three things, you'll naturally end up stumbling into the space anyways. And it might be better that you get familiar with the space sooner than later, so you can help educate the next generation of gamers as well.
I hate to be the pessimistic one.
Awesome. How about you, Marcus? What's your
my advice is going to echo what Sophia and Peter both said, like do your own research. But I think more importantly is don't click on any links that don't come from the direct team. I've been in the crypto space almost 10 years now, and I have seen scams from the ICO boom and bust to what's happening now in NFTs. And I've seen people who lose everything in an instant. And I'm really concerned, particularly about the esports market, because I believe it's so uneducated about crypto. For example, 100 Thieves, which is one of the top 10 esports orgs in the world, recently had their NFT drop. I want to say they had 225,000 redemptions. One of those reasons was because they made it free, right? The other is because they're a well-known brand, name brand in the space. However, you have now introduced potentially 225,000 people who have absolutely no idea what crypto is, or at least that there are dens of thieves waiting to pounce on the unsuspecting, right? So I'm concerned about that, because I'm just concerned about it. I don't know. I have to think about it more. It's a ton of opportunity in the space, but people need to be very diligent and cautious.
Well, actually, 100 Thieves launched on the Polygon chain. So I want to say, like, to your point, yes, there's fear where things are very new. That's normal. There's a lot of fear of what does this mean? And do these people have good intentions or whatnot? But it's great that you're kind of lowering the barriers to entry as well. Because if you're going to go with that perspective of fear, then it doesn't leave much room to progress.
Mm-hmm.
I think at some point there has to be an element of let this kind of run free. And I think it kind of goes with the spirit of decentralization, because if you were to approve who gets to buy the NFTs, or get to approve more processes, you're kind of going back to that idea of centralization and being the gatekeeper. So the fact that, anyone can join is very much a part of the nature of the space. That you don't need to be a celebrity, like you don't need to be so-and-so. So I would hate to see the space further lose its element of decentralization, as it's already losing at the moment because of the regulatory framework. So how do you exist in this regulatory framework and keep your decentralized ethos is already very hard. And so making things more centralized, I don't believe will be the solution. I feel like awareness, education, technology that prevents these things from happening should be the solution.
No, I agree with you 100%. So let me say it differently. I want everyone to have access to it. I'm highly against centralization, and I think to a degree, some investor dollars create a necessary amount of centralization in the Web3 space. But like first-time users don't understand that if you click on a link, right, then you potentially have granted access to your wallet to someone who can just, remove however many assets out of it, or they could you could purchase a wallet that might have some smart contract code in it that you don't understand code, so you didn't audit it, and now any number of things you're now vulnerable to any number of things. So that's my concern. I want to see the growth. I'm all about the growth, and kudos to you all for everything you're leading in the space. I just don't think that the esports side of the audience is nearly as versed enough as it needs to be in Web3, and it makes them low-hanging fruit for scammers.
I will say maybe something, maybe an unpopular opinion, but I think the right solution for the argument between centralization and decentralization is somewhere in the middle. I think centralization brings a lot of value from the terms of user experience, which has been the biggest pain point for onboarding the next wave of users today, particularly around user safety, user education, and others. And then which requires centralization actually to educate users, so then eventually when they are properly equipped, they will have the ability to handle things on their own, which is the true meaning of decentralization. And then a big aspect, I think it's just a pathway to get there, because I think there's a ton of users that may benefit from both a custodial wallet aspect of having someone else monitor their wallet or bank versus a non-custodial methods as well. So I think finding the balance of both, and both from a gaming perspective and a larger NFT perspective, it's a hard question to answer, but I think those are the things that are being worked out today.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're kind of talking about internet circa 92, 93, 94, where there was a lot of opportunity for hackers or people that wanted to engage in malpractice to potentially exploit the newcomers as well. But then we had solutions like, Kaspersky and these, softwares that would protect you from that. And I feel like that's where there's a lot of potential for cybersecurity in Web3 versus here are all the tools that you need to know for you not to get hacked versus downloading a software that would potentially prevent that. There's only so much that you can do to protect yourself. And I feel like, with the progress that we have right now with AI and cybersecurity in general, we should be able to have that as a service. I believe that will come out shortly. There is a niche for that at the moment, for sure, for all the on-chain activity that's going on. But at the moment, yeah, to your point, be careful. Don't click on links that you don't trust. Don't open emails that you don't know of. I think there's only so much that you can do. Don't be paranoid as well. Have fun with it. I mean, I would hate for anyone to kind of be engaging and at the same time be paranoid. That would be a very interesting mix, but a good dose of everything is good. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hey, Marcus, Peter, Sophia, thank you so much for this awesome conversation. This is definitely for hours and hours. So I'm really thankful for you definitely spending an hour, spending this hour with us. For those in the audience, please do make sure that you're giving them a follow. A few of us are going to go to a Twitter Spaces right now. You'll be able to see it in the pinned tweets there. Or if not, I'm going to post it right here again. So please join us over there. Again, make sure that you're following TF Labs. Give our speakers a follow. Give me a follow. We're going to be hosting, and we are hosting weekly events on different subjects. We've talked about making this Web3 and gaming a pretty consistent one that we do once a month. So Marcus, Peter, and Sophia, would be great to have you again. Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll chat here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Sophia, Peter, Jonathan, it's been awesome.
Great meeting you, everyone. Bye-bye.